Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out Stephen Fry on American versus British comedy.
We have time for one more question, which will come from the gentleman there.
You talk about the sense of humour, the American sense of humour, and we haven't really touched, you haven't mentioned so much the British sense of humour, but do you think they differ hugely? And if so, what accounts for that difference?
If I can just interject before the great Stephen Fry says anything, in my mind, one of the best comparisons of the two senses of humor is the show The Office. And the UK version had a main character, the Ricky Gervais character, who was very desperate, very needy. It was almost hard to watch, but maybe that's my American sensibilities. And then the Steve Carell character in the American version was a little more hopeful, definitely out there and kind of crazy, but it was a little smoother for me to take in. Anyway, that's enough of me blabbing about it. Let's see what an expert says.
It's a really good point. I think, it strikes at the heart of what is American optimism is a really important thing, but not only optimism, but a refusal to see oneself in a bad light, or, one could talk about this for far too long, but
It's true.
if you go to an American bookshop, by far the biggest section is self-help and improvement. The idea that life is refinable and improvable, and that you can learn a technique for anything, whether it's lovemaking, being a businessman, a marriage, cooking, losing weight, whatever it is, there's an NLP.
I didn't know that was an American thing. Interesting.
Way of doing it. There's an Anthony Robbins way of doing it. There's a things they didn't teach you at Harvard way of doing it. There's an unbelievable sense that life is improvable, that you can be lectured at, or indeed given a sermon at. It's the Protestant base of America, that things are done by text and by works, as opposed to by submission and by a doctrine in the way that the higher church, European rump, we still believe. And
that's really fascinating. He's tying the two different forms of comedy to the original reason that America exists, which is people trying to escape religious persecution. Of course, technically it did exist before that, and there are a lot of people who lived here before Europeans came to America. I know that, but in terms of Western culture, that's really interesting. So he's saying that the British live under this doctrine of the church, where this is the way it is, no matter what. Americans live under the idea of worship, where things can change, we can tailor this to how we want it. I didn't think it went that far back. That's fascinating.
In the way that the higher church, European rump, we still believe. And there is a sense of original sin in Europe. I mean, this is a bizarre theory that I won't push to its limit, but when it comes to comedy, it's satisfactorily, I think, obvious that the American comic hero is a wisecracker who is above his material and who is above the idiots around him. And the British comic, put it this way, the American comic hero, like John Belushi or someone like that, is that scene in Animal House where there's a fellow playing
funny movie
music on a guitar, and John Belushi picks up
he smashes the guitar
and destroys it. And the cinema loved it because he just smashes it and then waggles his eyebrows at the camera. Everyone says, God, he's so great. Well, a British comedian would want to play the folk singer. We want to play the failure. All the great British comic heroes are people who want life to be better and on whom life craps from a terrible height. And whose sense of dignity is constantly compromised by the world letting them down. They want to wear a tie. They're not quite smart enough to wear an old school tie, because they're kind of lower middle class. They are Arthur Lowe in Dad's Army. They are Anthony Aloysius Hancock. They are Basil Fawlty. They are Del Boy. They are Blackadder. They're not quite the upper echelons.
Interesting.
And they try to be decent and right. Everything tries to be proper. They're even David Brent from The Office. And their lack of dignity is embarrassing. They are a failure. They are an utter failure. They're brought up to expect empire and respect and decency and being able to wear a blazer in public, and everyone around them just goes whereas the American hero is the smart talking, he's Jim Carrey and he's Ben Stiller and he's whoever, he just goes all the way back. They can wisecrack their way out of any situation. They win the girl, they're smarter, they've got the biggest knob in the room.
That's really interesting. I think that some of that comes from the movie industry or entertainment industry, where people want to see themselves in the main character and they want to feel good about themselves. So, of course, make the character have a big knob. I wonder when this was filmed, because I do feel like American comedy has inched over into more of that British comedy style, or maybe it's just because of the internet and the way the cross-pollination happens. But I do feel like there's more of that like low-status character in American comedy now than there used to be. Well, like Steve Carell's character in The Office, he wasn't wisecracking. If anything, he was the idiot. And Jim was the wisecracker.
They win the girl, they're smarter, they've got the biggest knob in the room. The British guy arrives at the room and says, oh my God, I've left my knob behind. I haven't even got one. And in a sense, comedy is the microcosm that allows us to examine the entire difference between our two cultures. Ours is bathed in failure, but we make a glory of our failure. We celebrate it. We love the fact that every great British comic hero can go into a dictionary. He's a bit of a Basil Fawlty, he's a bit of a Captain Mannering, he's a bit of a Steptoe, he's a bit of a Baldric, he's a bit of a Blackadder, he's a bit of a this, they're characters that we recognize, all of them so flawed as to be an utter disaster. But you can't do that with American comedy. You can't say he's a bit of, who's that chap in Friends, or he's a bit of a, it doesn't really work. They're not characters at all. They're just brilliant repositories of fantastic killer one-liners.
I have to disagree. I see what he's saying. But I have to disagree. That's a wide generalization. Like I said, not all American comedy is that way. But when comparing the two, I can see why he would make that generalization. There's a line in a Pink Floyd song that comes to mind. Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. That kind of fits with what Stephen Fry's saying. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what I should react to next, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.